Hello. Let's see if I can get you to change your mindset about all this. And by all this, I mean the election. Um, I'm going to link to an excerpt from a video that Donald Trump posted, and it shows his son, Donald Jr., explaining why you should be very happy. We should all be very grateful that this happened because this gives us an opportunity to see the most brilliant counterattack in American history. Now, counterattacks are actually more important than attacks because it requires a completely different skill set. And if you my field of study is World War One, and the Germans were the greatest counterattack experts in World War One, and nobody ever learned how to do counterattacks the way the Germans did. And the German counterattack relied on hitting the enemy. Okay, the Germans use something called elastic defense, which is what Trump has done. The Germans invented elastic defense, and what you do is when the enemy attacks, you retreat, but you're giving up ground that isn't important to you. The enemy thinks it's important. And so the enemy is drawn deeper and deeper into your territory. And in World War One, they didn't, attack and then just keep going until they hit Berlin, for example. They would attack along a front, I don't know, um, three quarters of a mile wide, a little less, and they would take, say, the first three trench lines, the fire trench in front, and the support trench, and the reserve trench, and they would take these trenches, and then the trenches. A trench isn't just, you know, um, like when you see them digging trenches today to build to bury pipes. That's not what they were in World War One. They have the front part, or the part of the trench that faces the enemy, is called the parapet, and the part that faces your own side is called the. I've never said this out loud, believe it or not. Parados or parados, I don't know, but the parapet is different than the side that faces the enemy is different than the side that faces your own side. The side that faces the enemy has sandbags, and it has steel loopholes for firing through. So when you took over an enemy trench, you had to reverse it. So it wasn't just a case of getting in the trench and it's like, okay, now we've made it. You had to reverse everything. And so you had to take shovels with you when you assaulted, and it took quite a bit of time. The men had to take, they had to move the sandbags from what was once the parapet and move it to the new parapet, which is the formerly the friendly side of the trench. And so the assault troops often were encumbered by empty sandbags, which they had to fill with dirt and tie off, and they often had to dig in order to set their steel loopholes, and poor men had to carry these steel shields, which are really heavy, and so it took a while. So what the Germans did was they would fall back the way Trump has fallen back. The enemy would think that, oh, I've taken the position, and then the Germans would attack on the flanks, on the sides, using the counterattack, and in the enemy's front, they had close combat experts, and the close combat experts had they relied on speed and firepower. So the men who attacked on the sides, on the flanks, in the counterattack, they had the usual infantry weapons, and the men who did the frontal attack, the frontal counterattack, the first men in line were carrying light machine guns, light mortars, and grenade launchers. And they were modified so that they could be set up instantly, and they would pour fire onto the enemy. The when the Allies attacked the British, the French, and the Americans, they had rifles, light machine guns, and rifle grenades. That was it in terms of weapons. And in the rifles and machine guns, you had to put your head up. You had to expose yourself. And so the counterattack division, they would have whole divisions that were trained only in counterattack. The men attacking from the front poured such heavy fire with machine guns, light mortars, and grenade launchers that the enemy, the machine guns forced the enemy to keep his head down, and then the mortars and the grenade launchers, they had curved trajectories, so they went up in the air and they came down right in the trench. And when you fire a rifle grenade, you could fire it from inside a trench without exposing yourself, because a rifle grenade, unlike today's, well, I guess today's rifle grenades could be used that way. You fire it at an angle, you fire it up in the air, and it goes in an arc. But you could fire it from inside the trench without exposing yourself. So the Germans had their own rifle grenades, but mostly they used grenade launchers and light mortars. So these things would come raining down, and while the heavy fire was being poured onto the enemy, the close combat experts, who were armed only with hand grenades, pistols, and trench daggers, and these guys were chosen because they were extraordinarily physically fit. They had to be able to run as fast as they could, sprint for a full kilometer. That was the final test. And I remember almost dying after the 50-yard dash. I think there was a 600-yard dash when I was in high school. I don't know. But, these guys had to run. They had to sprint for a full kilometer and be in shape to fight when they got there. And they fought with hand grenades, and then they jumped in the trench, and they used their pistols and their daggers to kill everybody in the trench. And the counterattack was much more violent than the attack. What the Allies would do is they would use what's called a creeping barrage with artillery, where the artillery would fire and the Germans would simply abandon the first three trenches, and so the artillery didn't kill anyone. It was the Germans had outsmarted this tactic. And then as the enemy were trying to convert the conquered trenches into their own trenches, they would be hit with the hardest hit they'd ever experienced, and they would retreat, having lost sometimes as much as 50% of their men. And until the end of the war, the Germans were able, with their counterattacks, right near the end of the war, I think Um, it was at a village called um, Fismet in France, and a German, something like I think three German platoons completely destroyed two entire American infantry companies. Um, they used flamethrowers, light machine guns, and hand grenades. And one infantry company was completely wiped out. They suffered virtually 100% casualties, and the other virtually surrendered. So they lost virtually uniformly surrendered. So the Americans lost two full infantry companies. That's 400 odd men, and they were taken by geez 12. They were taken by about 48 to 60 men. So that was the counterattack. And we now get to witness the Trump counterattack. So I want you to change your mindset, okay? You need to change your mindset. This is going to be fun. It's another adventure, okay? This isn't bad. Trump dug a trap, a tiger pit, and everybody, they all fell into it. I haven't seen it, but apparently Anderson Cooper said that we're seeing the last flailing, thrashing of an obese tortoise lying on its back. So Trump is letting them all gloat because he's setting them up. He wants everybody to think he's done for. And then he's going to launch the most violent counterattack they've ever seen. So this, this is how Trump operates. And this is, again, I put up a video about the CISA, which is the new federal agency. It's part of the DHS, which is dedicated to finding and defeating election fraud. The court battles are part of it, but people think that's all Trump's going to do. No. What I just described to you, the German counterattack, you're under heavy fire. You can't put your head up to fire your rifle or machine gun, and there's nowhere to hide. You can't hide from these mortar rounds and these aerial grenades coming down on you and blowing up. Then all of a sudden these apes they start throwing hand grenades at you. They jump into the trench. They've got a pistol in one hand and a dagger in the other, and they just start going from man to man, shooting them and stabbing them. Shoot, stab, shoot, stab, shoot, stab. And if you throw up your hands and say, please, they'll say, okay, what they'll do is they'll take the bolt out of your rifle and put it in their pocket, and then they'll keep moving. So the German counterattack was the most terrifying thing anyone had ever experienced. The counterattack divisions were more feared than the assault divisions. And when you train, when you are extremely well trained in counterattack, you are a more important your element of any armed force than the actual assault troops. So be glad. I've told you over and over and over again, this is a great time to be alive. And now we get to see Trump counterattack without mercy. He's held back for a reason. And, I know I'm going to get in the comments, well, but I'm impatient and I know you're right, but I want him to do it my way. And it's like, stick it up your butt. I spent 5 years trying to reach people like you. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm just telling you the reality of what's going on. There's some of you who get it. So you need to think of this as you need to be thankful that this happened, because now you get to see history in the making. Okay? Trump, I told you the whole time, my friend Carlos and I told you when we were on Twitter together for 5 years, Trump has not yet begun to fight. And you were all going, well, why not? What's he waiting for? He's waiting for this. He's waiting for this. And he's not fighting back yet because he wants everybody to count him out. And that's when he's going to counterattack. The German counterattack divisions waited until the enemy was sure that he was safe. And then they hit them harder than they'd ever been hit in their lives. They hit them with more violence than they'd ever experienced in their lives. Okay? The Germans specifically recruited men as the close combat experts who were 6 feet tall. This is back in the day when the average European man was like 5'7" or something. So, and these were brawlers. These were like, they were fighters. Trump is a fighter. So you need to, if you're going to be afraid, you're going to be afraid. Some of you get it, and now you have to start being happy. You have to start being grateful that you now get to see this happen, because it's going to be glorious. You're going to be so stunned. Okay? So, nobody sees this coming. I see it coming. Donald Trump Jr. sees it coming. And of course, Trump's inner circle sees it coming. All right? They know exactly what's going to happen. And I consider myself a we because I can see what's coming. We have to wait until the enemy thinks he's safe. That's when the counterattack is the most effective. And you have to admit, it's going to be much more fun after watching them gloat for days and days and days and insult the president, calling him an obese tortoise, flailing desperately. Anderson Cooper, you're going to be eating your own words in such a way, you're never going to be allowed to forget that. You thought it was bad when you had your little mental breakdown over pee-pee and poo-poo, but nobody's going to let you forget that. And I just hope that wherever Anderson Cooper goes for the rest of his life, he's mocked for being that kind of person. So, to recap, the counterattack is more important than the attack. You win wars by counterattacking. And the coming counterattack is going to be the most violent and efficient one you've ever seen. So you need to be happy that this happened. Okay? You can be angry and happy. I'm still angry, but I'm also happy. I can't wait to see comeuppance. Comeuppance is justice. So, I tell people, be happy warriors. And it's like, okay, you're the reason I don't want to go back to social media. I only want contact with happy warriors. I don't want any more whiners. I don't want any more, uh, as Donald Trump Jr. said, spineless Republicans. I want only happy warriors who look forward to the fight. Till Valhalla. All right. Um, I'm happy because I know it's going to happen. And if you're not happy, it means you're not a real Trump supporter. If you don't know whether you're going to vote for me or not, then you ain't a real Trump supporter. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you don't, if you're not happy, that means you don't have faith in your president. And obviously you never will. So that's why, I call it a trial separation, folks. Um, so anyway, my latest thoughts. So, click.